Hello there. Welcome to Some Idiot Reads, or I'm Cy. I'm some idiot. And it's time to read some shit. This week we are looping ourselves right on back to the fantastic missives of one Coyote Wallace and his dispatches from Appalachia. This one actually just came out like 3 days ago. And the timing was fantastic on that. I've actually got an upload coming on Tuesday. So, I was going to read this article, but then I got some stuff for an upload I'm doing on Tuesday. So instead of reading an article before this came out, I did that reading coming up on Tuesday, and then this came out. So now I can read the fresh one. I'm still waiting on coffee. I've been up for maybe an hour. So, cheers. Let's just go ahead and dive on in, shall we? What we have today is Frank Keeney, the man who would not bow. And we start out with a pack, a group, a collection of coyotes. Coyotes, unlike people, naturally know about solidarity. Fall has come at last to Appalachia. The trees have begun to cloak themselves in hues of vibrant red, orange, and yellow. And at evening, when the sun slips behind our mountains, you can feel the chill growing in the air. The crickets, stubborn to the last, still sing their songs in the stillness, and the day feels all too fleeting. Soon, it will be cider season. And then the ceaseless bundling against the cold of winter will be upon us. This is a beautiful land. For all its hardships and troubles, Appalachia blazes with a brilliance that can strip away your breath in the fall. The beauty and idyllic setting can make one forget the legacy of this place. You can almost pretend that the struggles of mankind are beneath the notice of our mountains, and you may be forgiven for believing that peace has always held fast in our hollows, valleys, and backwoods. Time slips away from us like an old friend who can never stay too long, and history is the footprint left behind by time's passing. Side note, that is poetic as shit, dude. Holy God. And Lord Almighty, if we don't have us some history. Pictured. The Appalachian Mountains in the fall. Long ago, in the time of our fathers' fathers, there was no peace to be found in this land. During a time when the rich and greedy ruled as kings rule, a time of strife and struggle, our history was paid for with blood. Good men were killed in the streets for believing they deserved better than to be treated like dogs, and the best men stood against the efforts of the oligarchy to break them down. Do not let our mountains fool you. Do not let the myriad of colorful bounty provided by nature deceive you. This is a land of conflict, of betrayal, and of bloodshed. And with the beat of every Appalachian heart, the legacy of our past is carried forward for the next generation. We are the descendants of Sid Hatfield, the daughters of Mother Jones, the sons of Ma Blizzard, and the warriors of Solidarity. Our history, the very fabric of our people, is rife with tales of bravery, compassion, and at times, fiery retribution. We remember our heroes through folk tales, campfire songs that have survived since the days of the old coal camps, and we enshrine their names on brass placards that have gone green with the passage of time. We remember them for what they sacrificed, what they endured, and what they gave us to protect not only our people, but all the people of our nation. We are, at our heart of hearts, a culture of survivors, pulled from all corners of the globe and melded together through isolation and hardship. We are the bootlegging outlaws of prohibition. We are the organizing women of the Union. We are the fighting men of Blair Mountain. We are the souls that traveled into the darkest pits of the earth to bring back the fire that would fuel the American Industrial Revolution and feed the mighty trains that carried quote-unquote progress into the Wild West. They called us names like Tinker Pink, Coal Whop, and much worse. We had bombs dropped on our heads by the military. We had poison gas used on our children by the richest men in the nation. We were gunned down in the streets, buried beneath mountains, thrown out of our homes, and beaten senseless for our defiance. Our children, little babies, without a bite of bread to eat, were killed or conscripted. A people who, according to our paymasters, were worth less than the mules to haul up the coal. But our myths are as old as our mountains. Even our lost legends can never die. I think I've got it this time. I'm reading the words of Coyote Wallace. This is the Dispatches from Appalachia. And today, we're talking about one of the toughest, roughest, and most fiery men to ever stand with his Union. A man who is shrouded in controversy, who has been both hero and villain in the UMWA's history, and who was tried for treason over his participation in the labor movement by a shamelessly corrupt administration that sought to exploit the people of Appalachia while lining their pockets with the money our coal earned them. A man who spit in the eye of King Coal and even the UMWA itself in equal measure. Today, my friends, we discuss Frank Keeney, the man who would not bow. Making a Union Man. Charles Francis Keeney, later to be known as Frank Keeney, was born in the coal-dust-laden town of Paint Creek, West Virginia, on March 15, 1882. Paint Creek, nestled within spitting distance of its larger cousins like Mattawan or Charleston, was in the midst of being redeveloped into one of the great jewels of King Coal's crown. The soil of Paint Creek is rich with minerals, particularly coal, and despite the fact that Paint Creek is only 41 miles in length, there managed to be 40 active coal mines. That's not terribly enchanting sound. One moment. Need to turn that off. And mute. There we go. Sorry about that, listeners. Neighboring Cabin Creek, itself even smaller, had 55 active mines. Every mile you traveled brought with it a new pit full of men from all over the world and of all races toiling in the dark to haul up the coal from deep within the earth. Pictured, child coal miners of the time. Please note the coal or dust around their mouths from lack of gear. Despite the amount of coal brought in Despite the amount of coal brought in for the mine owners and all the money that it made them, Paint Creek had long been a site of some of the harshest mistreatment of the Appalachian people. Gun thugs, strikebreakers, crooked lawmen, and a corrupt government all conspired to keep the people of Paint Creek under their heel. This is a place where a man might find himself at the end of a rope for talking about unionization. A place where hired killers of the mine owners were free to operate however they saw fit. And a place where people were long on hunger, but short on hope. The conditions in which the men worked in these early days were brutal and often spelled death or ruin for those who braved them. There are dozens of ways a man may have his life stolen from him beneath the mountains, for the mountains insist on taking back some measure of repayment for the theft of their riches. Even with the mitigation of those dangers by modern equipment and standards, mining is still one of the most dangerous jobs in America. And at the time Frank Keeney was born, it was without a doubt the deadliest profession in the world. Faulty beams and supports could bring down stones heavy enough to crush a man flat. Lack of rock dust spread upon the floors and walls could often lead to flash fires that cooked men alive beneath the earth. There were electrocutions, men crushed by minecarts, trapped and doomed in pitch blackness of cave-ins, and even pools of carbon monoxide hidden underground, called white damp, that could kill unwary men by the dozen. Those who survived their daily labor were not free from danger when the whistle blew. If a man was lucky, only the as-of-yet undiagnosed silicosis might steal away some of his life. Coal dust gets into everything, including your lungs, and once inside, it shreds and tears up tissue like bits of glass. Prolonged exposure without proper gear or efforts made to keep the dust down turned men's lungs into a coal slurry and stole away their very breath. The unlucky might find themselves afoul of the gun thugs and mine security men who patrolled the streets and camps. These were hired killers who had been deputized by the state of West Virginia, many of them seasoned in the art of protecting their master's interests. They had free rein to do as they pleased with our people, a dispensation they abused regularly, and with a hellish vigor. Pictured gun thugs in West Virginia at the time of the Coal War. This was the world Frank Keeney was born into. This was the world that stole his father from him at the tender age of 1. The mines take people. They always have, for that is the nature of the work, and I suppose they always will, for that is the nature of man's greed. This harsh landscape, where men were treated as dogs, and where the rich kept their boot upon the necks of the poor, was instrumental in shaping the man that young Frank Keeney would become. The loss of his father would have meant the loss of any financial security or home place for him and his mother. The absence of his father would have pressed him, as a boy, into service digging coal. He worked alongside the men that would one day become UMWA District 17 as he grew from a boy and into adulthood. By all accounts, he was a serious-minded and passionate man who was held in the highest regard by those who worked with him. His nerve did not break beneath the mountains. He took care of those who ventured into the darkness with him, and there's little more that one can do to be held in higher regard than that. Before all things, Frank Keeney was a product of the harsh living, rough circumstances, and difficult labor that made up this period in King Coal's lands. He was a son of Appalachia, a man just trying to survive on what the coal barons paid. But soon he would be called to work towards something greater than a paycheck. Solidarity. Pictured, armed miners of Erksdale, West Virginia. The first strike. By April 18th, 1912, the then 30-year-old Frank Keeney found himself in the middle of a clash between the forces of the working class and the oligarchy. Mother Jones and other labor activists who had seen the conditions in Paint Creek were rallying local miners to join with those at Paint and Cabin Creek to demand a better standard of living and an end to the unjust denial of their rights as American citizens. The following demands were made to the coal operators of Paint Creek and Cabin Creek, in good faith and with the hopes of a peaceful resolution. 1. The operators accept and recognize the union's legitimacy. 2. The restoration of the right to free speech and peaceful assembly. 3. The blacklisting of discharged miners in order to prevent them from finding work elsewhere is to immediately be stopped. 4. The forced and compulsory trading at company-owned stores is to be immediately stopped. 5. The practice of cribbing, the altering of coal cars to carry more than a ton while paying miners by the car or load, must be stopped. This system is to be replaced with 2,000 pounds being recognized as a ton of coal and scales installed at the mines to weigh the tonnage on site. 6. The miners be allowed to provide their own check weighman to compare against any weights found by the company weighman as provided by law. And 7. The 2 check weighmen determine all docking penalties. The response to these demands was as swift as it was bloody. The coal operators of Paint Creek and Cabin Creek brought in the Baldwin Felts Detective Agency, a feared and notorious contemporary of the more famous Pinkertons, who specialized in labor disputes and breaking strikes. They would soon bloody themselves at Ludlow, Colorado, where they burned the women and children of black and Polish miners alive. But first, they had to deal with us. The coal operators believed them to be just the solution to their problem. These men, known as gun thugs in the mountains, were the most hated souls to ever tread on Appalachian soil. Pictured, Mother Jones rallies the miners at Irksdale. This occupying force was led by Albert Felts, Lee Felts, and Tony Gajou, each a seasoned killer. They brought with them 300 armed men with orders to break the strike by any means at their disposal on May 10, 1912. The federal and state governments were as reliant on King Coal's bounty as King Coal was on their money. There would be no gentle handling of those who delayed the coal's extraction. The UMWA threw in behind the striking miners, and battle was set. Pictured, colorized photo of the Paint Creek Company store. By June, the evictions of innocent women and children from their homes by the gun thugs would become a daily occurrence, and sniper fire plucked men from their earthly concerns with regularity. Violence was the order of the day. The Union men clashed with their scab counterparts, and the gun thugs with such frequency that, if there was law in that land, it was only given weight by the pistol a man carried with him. Frank Keeney was just a rank-and-file Union man at this time. Amidst the blood and horror of starving children, he displayed the same qualities he once had as a miner. He was brave, risking death and fighting the gun thugs and scabs in the streets when needed, and keeping his Union brothers safe and cared for when that was required of him. He was a soldier in an army that had yet to be given its name, fighting in a war that no one outside of our mountains even knew was being fought. Frank Keeney soon proved his worth. Mother Jones, with the help of Keeney and others in the UMWA, was able to slip unnoticed through the armed guards at Irksdale, West Virginia, and speak to the miners there. Those miners, 3,000 of them, were so stirred by Mother Jones's words that they took up arms. By the time Jones returned to Paint Creek, those 3,000 men had subdued the mine guards at Irksdale and had crossed the mountain in an armed march toward the state capital in Charleston. They would soon read a declaration of war to Governor William E. Glasscock, who, by all accounts, hid in his office trembling and terrified during this particular moment in history. Pictured, redneck. What they are, not what they've been co-opted. Well, those 3,000 miners marched on Charleston. Another 5,000 arrived in Paint Creek from the northern corners of the state and as far away as eastern Kentucky. The ranks of the Paint Creek strike were growing every day, but so too was the violence and hardship. The gun thugs would not allow local businesses to sell food to the striking miners, and any resources provided to them by neighbors resulted in harsh penalties. Their goal was to starve the striking workers out. They knew the miners all had families, and the idea was that if the Appalachian was too stubborn to be broken by pain or bloodshed, then they would break us by making us watch our children wither and die. When one asks what fires forged men like Frank Keeney or Sid Hatfield or Bill Blizzard, you should pause and consider this. They made us watch our children starve to death for the sake of their money. They shot us down in our streets. They burned our homes. They wore badges, fine Yankee suits, and believed that because rich men paid their wages and crooked men pinned stars on their chests, they were fit to be the judge, jury, and executioners of our people. These were dark times for our people. This was the era of the Bull Moose Express, with its iron plates and machine guns that killed Sesko Estep. These were the old and bloody days when Mother Jones, our good Mother Jones, was hauled off by gun thugs in Pratt, West Virginia, in October of that very year. Not for breaking the law, but for reading the Declaration of Independence on an American street because they feared her. And Frank Keeney, and Don Chains, and Red Thompson, and every man and woman, black or white, foreign-born or domestic-raised, the way roaches fear the light. The struggle and the mine wars. The struggle was bloody, but by 1913, thanks to the effort of folks like Frank Keeney, Mother Jones, and Sarah Blizzard, the operators agreed to a compromise. The day had been at least partially won by the UMWA, and King Cole felt a sharp blow to his iron-fisted control of the region. The area would soon become a hotspot of Union activity, and Frank Keeney had proven himself to be a reliable defender of the rights of the working class. Frank Keeney was soon put in charge of local union activities, making him leader of UMWA District 17. Within just 3 short months of Keeney's appointment to the position, he had enrolled more than 2,000 new union miners to the cause of solidarity. This was the largest swelling of numbers in such a short expanse of time in the UMWA's entire history. These accomplishments, his bravery, and his commitment to the cause would have made Frank Keeney a hero in anyone's eyes. But he would not be allowed to rest. The Battle of Blair Mountain was about to plunge Frank Keeney and the people of Appalachia into its bloodiest chapter yet. The period that followed Frank Keeney's appointment would soon come to be known simply as the Mine Wars. While the Union had seemingly fought King Cole off during the Paint Creek struggle, and even derailed the mighty Bull Moose Express, the forces of the coal barons did not sit idle. They doubled down on bribery. They bought politicians and judges. Through the use of hired gunmen and scabs, they persisted in their attempts to erode away at the Union's gains. Frank Keeney kept his men steady through some of the bloodiest moments in Appalachia's history, including the Battle of Matawan where Sid Hatfield dispatched both Albert Feltz and his brother Lee Feltz, and 7 of the Baldwin Feltz's toughest men in a wild gun battle. These deaths would be answered with night raids and retribution by the gun thugs that stretched on for months. Eventually, Sid Hatfield himself was even laid low and murdered. Scarcely a year later, the Battle of Tug Valley was fought, and it was here that the Kentucky National Guard joined forces with the gun thugs to rain fire and bullets upon the heads of the striking miners who had been evicted from their homes. Sporadic violence would continue to rage on, and the governor himself would plead with the president to send in federal troops so they might bring a quote-unquote swift and comprehensive end to the quote-unquote Pink Tinker insurgency. Pictured participants of the Battle of the Tug. And Frank Keeney was there, organizing, leading, binding these men together, not from some smoky back room or some well-maintained house paid for with union dues, but in the thick of the fight where he belonged, where he felt he belonged. Keeney was fast earning a reputation as something of a tactician among the gun thugs, and his ability to motivate men soon earned him a place in the crosshairs of those hired killers who called themselves mine security agents. Sid Hatfield and his deputy Ed Chambers had been assassinated. Labor organizers like Mother Jones and Aunt Molly Jackson were being rounded up and arrested. 2 newspapers sympathetic to the miners' cause found themselves shut down and their editors thrown in jail. Frank Keeney was standing on the precipice of America's largest armed labor uprising, and as 20,000 miners began to go on strike and assemble in Keeney's District 17, he fed the fires of revolution. They tied red bandanas on their arms and around their necks so that they might know each other when the gun smoke grew thicker than any earthly fog. 20,000 strong, from all races and creeds. Black men marched beside white men. Irishmen stood next to Italians. The Polish joined hands with the Scottish. Women who had lost their husbands in the mines, and priests who swore off violence tended to the sick and the wounded. Even the little boys who had followed their fathers into the black pits of deep mines took up arms. They were killing us. They were starving us. They believed that our people deserved to beg for scraps like dogs, be worked like mules, and they didn't even have the decency to spare our babies the indignity of working themselves to death in the same foul holes that had claimed generations before them and generations since. We had what weapons we could steal and scavenge. They had bomber planes, poison gas, machine guns, and the entire might of the United States military behind them. Don Chafin, the leader of the gun thugs in the wake of Albert Feltz's death, gave standing orders to his men that all members of the Redneck Army were to be executed on sight. We were unworthy of trial, for we were no longer human beings, but beasts who had forgotten our place. They would spare us their bombs. They would spare our children their poison gas. All we had to do was bow down, as they did, to a king. That's all. All we had to do, in order to avoid the violence, was go back to work digging coal for the American Industrial Revolution. All we had to do, if we wanted to see the sunrise again, was let them send our young back into the dark. All we had to do was smile when they gave us the scraps from their table. Quote, You have no recourse now but to fight. The only way we're going to get our rights is with a high-powered rifle." End quote. Frank Keeney said that. He said those words on the eve of the Battle of Blair Mountain, when 20,000 men stood eye to eye with all the hell that King Cole could bring. He spoke those words into being, with bomber planes flying overhead, and the promise of death in the air so thick that you could taste it on your tongue. Pictured, bomber preparing to strike at Blair Mountain. Frank Keeney helped lead his people into battle and out the other side. Whether or not the UMWA and the miners were victorious on that day is less important than the fact they stood up. They stood up for you, born so many years later, who benefits from their labor struggle. Those who died, and many died, did so that we may enjoy a world where we are not mere wage slaves and are supposed to have the ability to feel dignity in our work. The bullets and bombs did not bring down Frank Keeney, but following the surrender of the Redneck Army's forces, he was arrested as one of the rebellion's central figures. Keeney, along with other organizers and 500 of his men, would be tried on charges of treason against the United States of America. King Cole wished to see Keeney hanged for his crimes and participation in the uprising. Pictured from the Baltimore Sun, April 25th, 1922, pictured are Fred Mooney on the left and Frank Keeney on the right, as well as who was Secretary Treasurer and President of District 17, respectively, of the United Mine Workers. Below is Judge J.M. Wood of Martinsburg, presiding judge at the trial. Keeney and his fellow miners were soon acquitted of the charges leveled against them, and as 1921 drew to a close, Frank Keeney and the miners of District 17 were granted their freedom at last. Clash of the Icons. In the end, it would not be a gun thug's pistol or the coal operator's corruption that brought about the end of Frank Keeney as a labor organizer, but the clashing ideologies within the UMWA itself. Frank Keeney, the man who would not bow, was soon to run afoul of the then UMWA president, John L. Lewis, sometimes affectionately called the Lion of the UMWA. Both men were on the side of solidarity, but Keeney had worked as a rank-and-file union member on the ground, while Lewis preferred a detached and more methodical approach to the business of organizing labor. Pictured Lewis giving a fiery speech for labor rights. The exact nature of their dispute is shrouded in both legend and mystery, but it essentially distills down to the fact that Frank Keeney believed that with World War I at an end and the price of coal declining, the coal operators would not be able to keep as many men employed. Keeney reasoned that this would eventually lead to another coal war and to the strikes and starvation that would come with such an outcome. John L. Lewis had adopted a policy of no backward steps, which meant that he would tolerate no cuts to wages or hours for the Union men, even if it meant another coal war or strikes. Frank Keeney, despite his militant actions during the coal wars, had no taste for another round of bloodshed. Keeney, defying orders from Lewis, entered into negotiations with the coal operators of southern West Virginia. They promised him only the smallest of wage cuts, but it would mean preserving the jobs of the miners. Nearly 1,000 men supported Keeney in this endeavor, many of them having fought alongside him during the violent days of the previous coal wars. Lewis, by all accounts, flew into a rage when he discovered that Keeney had defied his orders and was in negotiations with the coal operators. The order was given that Keeney would be stripped of his position as the head of District 17, and that he, along with those who would follow him, be expelled from the UMWA and from working in any union-held mine. This went over about as well as you would expect. For a brief period in 1922, Union brother fought Union brother, and the internal conflict threatened to rip the Union apart. Keeney, insisting that the UMWA cared more for its pride than it did its men, formed his own union, the West Virginia Mine Workers Union. So beloved was Frank Keeney that 20,000 men joined his union within the first year, which pictured men lining up to join Keeney's union. And King Coal was more than happy to feed the flames, for as the two unions clashed, the coal operators made tremendous gains in re-establishing their stranglehold on the land. Our people were divided, and once we were divided, we were easily defeated. Within 2 years of its formation, the West Virginia Mine Workers Union collapsed from lack of finances, as it was ground out beneath the boot heel of the larger UMWA and King Coal's court. Frank Keeney would never work in the mine industry again. He was blacklisted from all mine work by union and scab alike. The non-union mines wouldn't take him because he was an organizer of labor, and the union mines would not take him because he had defied the UMWA and been willing to take a wage cut. Keeney was forced to work where he could, including as a general laborer, a bartender, and eventually even as a parking lot attendant while he was in his 80s. One of the toughest men in all of the UMWA had been reduced to a shadow of his former glory, and he would live to see the fall of the Union and the resurgence of King Coal's forces in the land he loved. On May 22, 1970, Frank Keeney died at the age of 88, seemingly forgotten by his former Union brothers and enemies alike. But we remember you, Frank Keeney. The mountains remember you, Frank Keeney. All you have to do to remember him yourself is stand before our mountains and listen in the silence of a lazy morning or the slow rolling beauty of the setting sun. You can still hear the fiery speeches of the organizers, the crack of the redneck army's rifles. You can still hear the chatter of the gun thugs' machine guns and the whistle of the bomber planes as payloads as they fell to the earth. Pictured, the man that would not bow. Frank Keeney is gone, but like the man himself, his history is harder to kill than any flesh and blood being. He will always be here, just as Sid Hatfield will always be here, just as Mother Jones will always be here, and just as the Redneck Army will always be here. They are why we say, solidarity forever. Oh, that's a good one. All right, so now, for those of you that have been present on this channel before, you know the drill. For those new ones, make sure that you come on over. First and foremost, I have a link to the article in the description. Make sure that you go to the article, show it some algorithmic love, give it another read through yourself directly, and, importantly, give a clap right here. Is it showing it? It's showing it. Little icon right there for clap. Also, towards the top of the page and down here, this will normally be green, showing following. Give them a follow. He's at 176. We can keep cranking that up. It's worth doing. The man is cataloging a tremendous amount of Appalachian history, and he deserves to have the recognition for that. Like, legitimately. This is amazing stuff to have written, and I don't think I need to illustrate the parallels in principle, if not in the extremes of fact, for what did happen during the Cold Wars with life in America today. I don't think I need to illustrate that to anyone. And if I do, how the hell did you even find my channel? But make sure you do give him a follow. In addition, right here, this little icon, give it a tip. That can take you over to Coyote's Ko-Fi. I will also have a link to that in the description. Toss him something. $1, $5, $20, $200, $2,000 if you're feeling froggy. Whatever it is that you can afford to spare without actually harming yourself would be deeply appreciated by him. And lastly, let's see, can I come up with a quick comment? I had never heard about Frank Keeney. Keeney? Am I spelling it right? God, I feel terrible. I read it, yes. Read it for like an hour now. Well, half an hour. Several elements regarding and relating to the Cold Wars. Don't think I've seen high nor excellent recounting. And thank you for this. See? Go in. Leave a comment. Leave a comment. It helps. With everything running on an algorithm, leaving comments, giving these claps, following, they all help immensely with this sort of grassroots work. So make sure you do that. In addition, Coyote does have works published through Nightmare Press. Links in the description. Currently, at least as of the time of this, the only one of his writings that is currently published is American Mystic, The Life, Death, and Rebirth of Jimmy Wonderful. Excellent read. I have a link for that in the description as well. I'm Linky McGee. I shouldn't use words. He does have another book coming out here soon, Sarah Corbin's Bloody Revenge, the cover of which has been shown on Nightmare Press's website, which I believe will also have a link in the description. And in addition to that, I did mention at the top of this that I had another recording that's coming out on Tuesday of this coming week. That is going to be what I'm still currently leaning towards calling Nightmare Tuesdays, where I'm going to be covering more of the works in Nightmare Press's catalog. So make sure you check that one out. That'll get posted on social media as well, but go check it out. I'll have those organized into their own playlist, and I think that's it for right now. I'm gonna go drink myself some coffee, enjoy the remainder of my day off, and I already ate a bagel, so that was good, but I think I'm just gonna go chill for a bit. Highly encourage you, do what you can for that yourself. Try and enjoy life. Hopefully you enjoyed the reading. Go check out some of the others if you're so inclined. And take care of each other. Deuces.